Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is certainly my base, my Peter, my rock. What's up, Tom? How you doing?
Hello, friends.
That reference was just for you, Tom.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So tonight we're going to talk about basing in all its wonderful and myriad forms. And just to answer a comment that was put in the chat by Anthony Polcastro, Anthony, I'm just fine. Don't worry. I do that all the time. That's not even a thing, buddy. That's every morning, homie. But at any rate, yeah. So let's start with some news. What do we got?
I am just so out of sorts. I apologize. Give me just a second.
That's fine. Well,
It's
Tom's
been...
bringing up the news, which, I mean, I think we should talk about news in general for a moment here, which is just the I don't think we're like, what news are we going to have? Are they going to continue with rumors and spoilers and stuff? Like we'll talk about it a little bit because they did continue to publish stuff this week.
Yeah.
How long does that go on where they're saying like, here's new stuff. We have no release dates or concept of when we do, because right now that May 2nd date where the factory theoretically opens and stuff can theoretically ship. That's just that. That's all theory.
Right. Yeah, like that may not, like, I don't know how they continue to announce things. Like, I think their way forward, if I were GW, would be all community based, like hangouts and
content. Yeah, just community fun stuff. Share your stuff, share your army, get articles out,
and then
get people excited to work on what they've got.
Yeah, like paint-a-sodes and like all of those things that it creates community engagement, like painting contests and fan contests. You know, like I've watched the community team like sending out messages of like, hey, what's going on? You know, like what project are you working at? Hashtag, you know, blah blah blah. So like that's what I would imagine it would be, unless they continue to like preview things and then just like do a product dump where they double or triple up on releases for like a month to catch back up. I can't imagine that they do that.
Yeah.
It seems like what they would do is reorganize the release schedule.
Yep. Oh, that's interesting. Paul in the comments just said there's no more like Stormcast until after, because they are out of podcasts that don't reveal embargoed stuff.
Oh my gosh. That makes sense.
Because they do pre-record those well in advance and then sync them to the releases, right? Where they talk about where ostensibly they would have said, okay, here's our release date for the Lumineth. And so, you know, we'll record a podcast or two where we're talking about Lumineth in some way or whatever, right?
Right.
And yeah, so, you know, it's obviously it's very much in flux. So,
I mean, the whole world is just upside down right now.
Yeah, sure. With all this kind of stuff. I mean, I think they will. The hobby hangouts have obviously been a great thing. They've been doing those. For those who don't know, you know, they have been doing their daily hobby hangouts on Twitch and stuff. And those are great because now those are all available forever. Yep. So those are really good. Yeah. I think that's a good way forward. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody, I hope, is asking for people to go like put their life on the line and risk their health to make some more plastic toys. Like,
and if they are, shame on you.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
That's not what we're doing here, folks.
The stuff will all get made. Like, we don't have to worry about that, right? So, yeah. But we do still have some news right now, and obviously, I not to jump ahead of you, but the first piece of one of the first pieces of news we should discuss along that line is that this Saturday's another reveal show.
Right. Ooh, buddy, that's exciting. I'm excited. It'll be interesting to see what gets revealed, given the hold up, you know, the how they called everything off, and yeah, I don't know. You know, speaking of reveal show, we had a reveal.
We did. We had a reveal show. We covered it. Like they had a reveal show, and we did our post reveal thoughts. Yep. So if you want to see all of Tom's hot taking on the Lumineth stuff that was revealed, you can go watch that. It's there. It was from Saturday. We did it basically right after they finished theirs.
Yeah. And so we're not going to cover that again, but for those of you guys that are interested, they revealed a whole bunch of new Lumineth models. And they're interesting. Some people are really excited about that. That's great. I have a pretty hot take tinfoil hat theory. Feel pretty strongly about. Yeah, we'll see about that.
Sure.
So do you want to cover that tonight, or do you want to do that for
We can talk about it. Let's save it for the end of the news.
Okay, let's do that.
We'll go. Well, at the end of the news, this will be your one chance to go through your insane tinfoil hat narrative thing.
I mean,
and then we'll
am
go
I
from
wrong
there.
though?
Yes, but that's okay. But it would be awesome if you were right. But yes, you're wrong.
I mean, it's what you secretly want inside, isn't it, Vince?
Sure. No, it'd be super cool. Yes, 100%. I want what you're touting here. It's not. But that's fine. Yes, we'll go to our official ring a ding ding segment after this.
Indeed. Right. So preview, it's pretty fantastic. Rumor engine. We had a rumor engine.
It's up on the screen right now. Yes, indeed.
Kind of exciting.
It's clearly a Bone Reapers Underworlds warband.
Yeah, is it, which image do you have up? Do you have the
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I forgot to bring up the modified image. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, that's not the real image. I mean, that's one real image, but there's more real images here.
Sure. I don't happen to have that one handy. I'm sorry. I apologize to Mr. Mephisto, who did go to all the work to create a specially modified image. But yes, clearly it's the Bone Reapers.
Which could be OBR Shadespire.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. It could be not OBR.
I don't know, man. That's pretty OBR. Like the gem, the bone, and the rune are all pretty OBR. That would be pretty off-brand.
I don't disagree with you, but could it be something like Soulblight?
It's literally Volk Morton's same icon he has.
I mean, I know. I understand that. Like, I understand it's like 99.9% OBR. That's fine.
No, this is a good rumor engine. Look, we often, complain when rumor engines are so darn vague, right, that it's like impossible for us to actually say anything about what they are.
Right.
And this one is clearly OBR. And could it be a particular Warcry release instead of Underworlds? Sure. Could be. That's possible. We don't know what they have for the future of Warcry, right? They might have some non-chaos. Like, Death is officially in the All Points now.
Right.
The result of Wrath of the Everchosen was Death got a very strong foothold there. So they could do...
It could be something Warcry related.
Yeah, they could do a Warcry expansion. So we got, the 7 or 8, right, when we get the Scions? Chaos Warcry warbands, right?
Yep.
Cool. We could get 4 Death warbands, right? Because we know there's a bunch of different forces of Death there. We could get a Warcry Ghosty warband that's brand new, and a Warcry OBR warband that's brand new. Because that's possible as well. So yes, it could be Underworlds, it could be something like that. But there you go.
It could be a terrain set of traps for Warcry.
I mean, it's definitely some dude's axe.
Right, but couldn't this be like a pendulum axe swinging or something?
You're saying it's like a pit in the pendulum kind of thing,
or like an axe coming down from a statue. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I know.
It could be like, what if there was a terrain? Like, I just got the one terrain.
No, because it's painted way too nicely and not like a single piece of stone.
That's fair. I don't know. Like they've been doing the Warcry boxes of terrain, and I just wonder if there was maybe like a trap set or something that is like Death related. I don't know. I'm brainstorming here.
Sure.
Like, the obvious thing is to say that it's an OBR model. Sure.
Yes, my vote is either it's Underworlds, or if it's Underworlds 80%, it's Warcry 20%.
Sure.
Cool.
Sure.
Those would be like, if you were telling me to eyeball odds, that's what I would say. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm good with it. Like, it's clearly a nice paint job. You can tell from the nature of the axe and how they, lined it and highlighted it and stuff like that, right? It's very smooth. So, yeah.
Yeah. I can see that.
So, there you go. Cool. Good rumor engine. All right.
Yeah.
What else we got?
We also have the Seraphon FAQ dropped, and apparently unrendable Bastillodons is a feature, not a
bug. Yeah, sure.
Not a bug.
It's it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the Seraphon FAQ. So what I'll say is that most of the Seraphon FAQ was pretty much what we expected.
Right.
Right? Like it was
Yep.
it was just all normal cleanup for the most part.
Yep.
The reduction of the Ripper's chief only being able to use his ability once, of course, we
Yep.
all expected that, like, duh.
Yep.
The Stegodon chief actually having his Stegodon as a mount, as I proclaimed it should be, which is good because I had built this whole army that I'm going to paint this weekend around the concept of running a Stega chief.
Right.
And I am so excited about this dude. I
You
have
got
the
the-
old school, I have the old school skink chief,
Yeah.
and nobody's gonna be able to see him, but he's like such a funny little dude with his mohawk. He's adorable, adorable. He's got little abs. He's like such a great sculpt, and he's gonna be up on top of his Stegodon, his old metal 17-pound Stegodon that I have, and I made a special howdah for him out of the Warcry. You know all the wooden like spikes and stuff that are in Warcry.
Yep.
I made a special howdah of him for him out of that.
So that'll be cool.
Yeah, so thankfully we're good. Okay. They also fixed the whole shooting thing we mentioned.
Yep.
Where like that when can they shoot? Who can they shoot? What triggers it? Like that was all cleaned up. So good, great, fantastic. Oh, Paul said it's from the Skink with Spear unit. Yeah, I don't know. Probably. I have no idea where it's from, Paul. I have very old, lizard people from like the very much in the 90s. I remember where none of these things are from. At any rate, and then we got the Bastiladon thing, which restated the base rules in some kind of form that still confused the living bejesus out of everybody, which credit to the community member that made the image you shared around.
Yeah.
Because that's actually
the clearest picture.
Yeah, literally a picture was worth 1,000 words, right? And I have no idea why we kept this or whatever, but we did. So, like, yes, if you can deal mortal wounds to the Bastiladon, that's fine. You'll melt him down and it's all good. It's not no part of my complaint. Right. And this is where I see people go wrong. This discussion keeps happening, right? Like, okay, here's the basics of the power thing, right? If that Bastiladon gets rerolling ones to a save, in any form, which there are multiple avenues toward, then it does take 108 wounds, regardless of rend. It could be rend 1 million. It takes 108 wounds to deal the 3 wounds, on average, to deal the 3 wounds necessary to him to actually make him be able to fail saving throws with any regularity.
Yeah, it's pretty wicked terrible.
So, like, but mortal wounds melt him down. So, okay, maybe the answer is that's fine. He is just a monster. He's not like some superhero. He's not a battle line unit that can sit on, he's not Hearthguard Berserkers, right? I mean, seriously.
It's funny that you say that because the reality is with the Hearthguard, and it makes me laugh. I mean, the reality is that with the Hearthguard, like, he's not there. Like, that Bastiladon's not even a speed bump.
Sure, assuming they have the Mortal Rend build. Yes.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
If they go for the Rend build instead, this just then that Basti can just charge the side of them, and assuming he has reroll ones, just sit there for a long, long time.
Forever.
Yeah. And so, like, again, my pushback on this has never been power, because I think most armies can probably scrounge up the 3 mortal wounds it needs, like arcane bolts or something or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm not worried about him as a power thing. I find, let me put it this way for everybody, just to eliminate all clarity, because this is the constant cry of people who defend this ruling.
Right.
Yes, but people have mortal wounds. He's not that powerful, blah, 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 blah. I agree with all that. I find Hearthguard Berserkers way more egregious and offensive than these guys. The fact that 2 of these things, right, costs more than a 20-pack of Hearthguard Berserkers. Okay?
Sure.
That is not correct. That is an incorrect thing in this game right now. Value-wise, those guys take almost as many wounds to move.
I mean, it's laser drill.
Mm-hmm. And are far more valuable. Because damage-wise, they do literally an order of magnitude higher damage. Literally. They will do 10 times as much damage, right, in melee.
Yep.
And they also are battle line and tons of bodies and valuable for holding objectives and all that. So no part of my complaint with the Bastiladon has anything to do with power. I don't care. He's not a problem in the game power-wise. He's eminently dealable with.
Yeah.
My problem is watching everybody react to the FAQ ruling of like, I don't understand this, even when it's clarified.
Yeah.
Right? Because to explain it is so mind-bogglingly weird.
Yeah.
That's the problem. The problem is not the Bastiladon. He's problemless. He's A+. Way to go, Basti. You're fine in my book. Keep all your rules. Change nothing. What should be changed is the underlying rules that's allowing this nonsense to happen.
Right.
And the thing I put forward on Twitter that I honestly didn't get some people were nice enough to give some answers. None of them moved me or convinced me as to why we would do this. The answer is just remove the penalties. Can't take anything below a 1.
Right. Yeah.
And just allow the numbers to run into the negatives. Everything that I saw as pushback to that concept was not just a problem of that. Like, there's plenty of other places that already happens we allow, right? Like, pushbacks of, well, that is sort of complexity of doing calculations. The only things that were interesting was you'd have to think about how that works with run.
Right.
If something like a run or a charge goes into the negative, what the heck does that mean?
Yep, you go the other direction.
Right, like, yeah, like...
opposite, yeah.
Right, like, that becomes weird, right? Or, so, like, I'm sympathetic to that, and that I don't know how you resolve that. I suppose what you would have to say is in those numbers, like, since you just don't go anywhere, right? If, like, you'd need something in charge or run that says if the total number you can get is ever zero, then or 0 or less, you just go 0, right? Because we already do have exceptions in that way, like entangling reduces your run and charge by 2 to a minimum of 0, right? So, like, that's already there. So I don't see anything about it. That's the linchpin I think should be removed. Pull the stop at 1 and the problem goes away. But I'll ask it again here. If anybody can tell me anything that you think why removing that low cap, when we don't have a high cap, by the way, you can run numbers up above 6.
Right.
Right. You can get 7, 8. You can roll a 12 to hit if you get plus 6 to hit. Like, that's doable. Right.
Yep.
So I don't like if there's something I'm missing. I'm trying to approach this with the most humility because there's always second order consequences to game design decisions. I appreciate that and accept that.
Right.
I'm not sure what it would really impact. So there you go. Anyway, so that's the Basti. Hey, cool. Bring some mortal wounds. Make sure you hit him with that stuff.
Yeah. That is your option.
If he happens to get near a reroll 1 to save, stop attacking him.
Yes.
It's not going to do anything. You don't have enough attacks.
Disengage. You're wasting your time.
Right, exactly. Just leave. Walk away. Just walk away. Just walk away. Okay, so at any rate, cool. Like I have no problem with the. I'll tell you what I'd honestly love if they wanted to keep the Bastiladon that tough, Tom.
Yeah.
Then the way to fix that should have just been 1, fix the base rules, and then 2, say that the Bastiladon's ethereal as long as he has a 1+ save.
Sure.
Great, easy.
I would have been okay just giving him a 3+ and making it always ethereal.
Or whatever. Like, I want the Bastiladon to be super tough. I love the idea of him being super tough. So totally keep him super tough. None of the problem is with the Bastiladon. He's fine. Great. Good. A+. You're a cute little boy. Okay, cool. So there you go. All right.
Sure.
Yeah.
We had some more AdMech 40K stuff.
So Tempest Eye releases. Yeah, those are good.
You labeled as Tempest Eye Whirlwind's Edge releases.
Yes, I did. We got the information on those. I was happy to see. Tom, did you see that the Wiggy Boys are clearly going to come in 5-packs?
I did.
Which I'm excited about. So that's cool. And our big robot horse dogs are in 3-packs. So those are excellent demigryphs or like demigryphs or even Dracoths
I had to laugh because they were so excited about it, and they showed the image, and they're like, "There's 2 different types of units for the flyers."
Yeah, yeah.
And I swear I looked at that image for like 30 seconds.
You were playing like a highlights game of like
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
like
spot the
no
differences.
differences, and I'm just like, I don't see it.
Sure,
Like
sure.
maybe a different gun in their hand.
It is. It's a different.
But
It's a different weapon. Yes.
yeah, and I was just like, helmet, no, no, just couldn't spot it. So yeah,
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I've got about 2,000 points of my Whirlwind's Edge ready to go. A little more than actually.
yep,
A lot more than if you count like battalions and stuff like that, which I'm
yep.
not. I'm just talking raw points. So I'm gonna pause on that army until I because I've got plenty of other projects
Sure.
until that AdMech stuff comes out. So that's. But
That's
I'm super happy with it right now.
right. I mean, it's completely like right up your alley.
Yeah.
Like it's everything that you're gonna want to build.
Yeah, man. Those Mechanicus dudes are gonna end up being my balloon boys, I think.
Yep.
Right? My Endrin riggers.
Yep.
So I'll have those if I want to bring those in with one of the boats, which is cool.
Yep.
And I'll use the robot dogs as my demogryphs.
What are you gonna use the what are you gonna use the
Oh, and the big ship. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. What are you gonna use the big ship for?
I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Like something, certainly. I don't have I have like kind of a frigate, but I might use it as a frigate. I might do some modifications to it and make it into a Star Drake.
Yep.
It has dragon. It has draconic type wings. So I might put a big flamethrower on the front and stuff, or big snappy jaws or something. I don't know. We'll see.
Fun.
Yeah, I'll decide when it gets here because I think it's on a. I don't know what size base it's on. I couldn't quite tell from the image. So, but yes, I definitely want to use the airplane too, and modify all of them. By the way, like I'm not going to use any of them straight. I'm going to modify the heck out of all that stuff.
Yep.
So, yes. Yeah, cool.
We had another news item that I want to mention.
Yep.
We didn't mention it. You didn't include it in the notes, but I didn't tell you to. So, and I'm going to share an image for us real quick.
Okay.
Siege Studios does commission work, and are one of the individuals sold off one of their armies, and they've been in kind of a battle over the fact that like one of their buyers basically, or their buyer for the army basically stole the army, contested the charges, said this stuff didn't ship. And so they're a UK company. They shipped it to the US. It was originally in Houston, was the last known place. And it's floating around somewhere in the States. And so there's a lot of like conversions. It's a beautiful, beautiful army.
Yeah, that is cool.
And I'm going to go through some of the images. I know that we're not a 40K show, but if anybody does see this army floating around in the US, can you please report like where it was being played and by who, if possible? They're just trying to track down, and do kind of their necessary due diligence. Because the purchaser said that the army never arrived, even though it was like signed for by them, and yada yada yada. So They have a big long post on Facebook about it. And since we have reach, I wanted to raise the awareness of this because like stealing stuff is not cool. And so
no, absolutely, especially not when artists put a lot of work into this. And Siege Studios is really cool. That's a lot of great people. Amy works for them. Amy Snuggs works for them. There's just a lot of really great people in there. So,
yep. So we wanted to, I wanted to do our part to share the info on it. So. There's a report that it had been recently spotted in the Cleveland area, so it might be in the Ohio area. Who knows? So, yeah. So there's that kind of depressing piece of news today.
Well, there you go. That's all right. Internet, do your magic. Let's find that army. We'll get to the bottom of this.
It's very noteworthy because of all the conversions. So, yeah. So if you are in the 40K circles, keep an eye out for it. Other pieces of news. Yeah, we could do the theory craft.
So it's time. It's time. Ring a ding ding. Tom predicts a thing. So Tom, here we go. Tom, obviously, like I think to be fair, the new aesthetic did not land with you and ring with you.
Right.
which is fine. Everybody has their own personal tastes. If you like a thing, like a thing. If you don't like a thing, don't like a thing. Just don't ever crap on other people who do or don't like a thing. Don't be rude to others who have a different opinion than you. But your own personal taste when it comes to liking or disliking an aesthetic of something, like a model, is not wrong. That's just your personal taste. So for Tom, it didn't land. But what's great about it not landing is that it sent Tom down this weird road of research where Tom's, you just got your doctorate, obviously, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And I think everybody knows that. But obviously you've done, like, in doing what you got your doctorate for, you spent years literally in the depths of like detailed research and stuff like this, and being able to draw things together and find underlying, especially when it comes to like symbols and words and common languages and language connections and stuff like that, and really understanding these things at a deep level. And so you got to apply your professional career to a hobby obsession here. Is that fair?
That is fair.
All right. So walk us through this, Tom. Have you got images? What would you like to
do? I do. So I'm gonna start sharing some images.
All right.
So this started because for myself and for a lot of people, I think the bowl imagery and the hammers and the hats and all that was a very jarring like aesthetic. And so Vince and I, like, we did a lot of time talking back and forth. He was trying to nail down like what exactly about it is not okay. And so I spent a lot of time like reflecting on the design language, right? And so design language has to do with like what is chosen and why it's chosen and how those pieces are put together. And in digging into the design language, I made some really interesting observations that I think actually may point to some hidden lore pieces that hasn't been revealed, and I wouldn't expect them to be revealed in the book. This would be something like one of those things they hide in plain sight and then reveal like years down the road, right? As part of a narrative campaign. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, the what I would invoke when I begin to go down this rabbit hole is the story of the Eternity King. So the story of Malekith, right?
Yep.
And how like the clues were always there if you were reading all the Elven books in 8th edition, that like Malekith, like it wasn't that he was rejected, it's that he basically chickened out, that he was the true king and all that. And then like that became revealed in full grandeur
in the end times. And,
right.
And some people would say that was a retcon. Some people would say the seeds were there for it the whole time. Who knows? Doesn't matter. It ended up being the actual history.
But when you look back through, you can see the crumb trail, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Through all the lore where it was seeded and it was present there, but nobody had really like assembled the case. And so I'm going to assemble the case for what I think is true about the new Lumineth that probably won't be revealed in this book, and it may take years for them to reveal. Okay, here we go. So what it started with was the mountain rune. Okay, so the mountain rune is this like much contested. So the mountain rune is associated with the bull, like the big mountain bull. I forget what he's called. The spirit of the mountain, yada yada.
Okay.
And let me pull up an image of that real quick for us, and then I'll kind of cycle through some other images. Okay, here we go. So we have this image, and here's the image of the rune. And it struck me as I was staring at this rune that I was like, I could swear I've done that before, right? I've seen this before. But so then when I went back to during a hobby time, so I'm like staring at this rune and staring at this rune and staring at this rune.
And that's from the chest of the new
it's on the staff.
Alarith rock monster, yes.
It's on the staff, it's on Teclis's belt as one of the four
Yep, because it's one of the four elements, yes.
Elements, right. And I was like, and it dawned on me that like this doesn't feel elven, right? It doesn't have any of the hallmarks of the Elven Ruins. Let me show you. All the Elven Runes have like squigglies, right? Like there's a lot of like flowy like marks to the design language of Elven Runes. And actually the other 3 runes on Teclis's belt all have this design language.
Sure.
Of like the curvy, flowy squiggles, of some part of the rune. Like there's almost always straight, rigid, but there's almost always curves to everything. And you can see it all the way down like these, whether it's the rune of Asur down here, or like just all of them.
Yep, okay. I gotcha.
So then I was like reflecting on this, and I was like, this feels like a dwarven rune, And like as I was making that observation, I was like, I've seen this before. And then I realized that it's on the dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's weird. It's all over the Fire Slayers. But I dug through the dwarf books, and it's not in any of the dwarven normal rune language.
Okay.
So it's not in any of the standard runes. The closest in the Khalazad language that it would be some modified version of the Encore rune, which means realm or domain, which would be appropriate, right? Like in the original Khalazad, the I don't have an image of it, but the rune that means domain or realm is very similar to this. But this looks like a modified form, and this looks very similar to the Elven rune as well. Again, a modified form, and it would make sense if it was realm or domain. But then I began thinking about like all the disparate elements that we have that we're looking at, which involve like the runes, we have hammers, we have big hats. And then we have bowl imagery, we have like huge horns. And then I saw this meme. Okay. And it's really funny, like, first of all. But
Sure.
what struck me was that like the hat is identical. Like it's certainly scaled up, right?
Of course. But like identical is a stretch, but I get it. Yes. Aesthetically, it's very similar. Tall hat, bull head on top. Yep, got it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And obviously it made me laugh because there's some truth to what is being echoed here, right? And so it sent me down a rabbit trail into Tamercan, digging through their rune language.
Okay.
Right. And in their official page, it wasn't there, but in one of the art pieces, and again, I don't have the art piece, I posted up on the Facebook group. In one of the art pieces,
do you have a different image you can shift to so we're not sitting here looking at this?
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
We'll jump back here. So I think it's funny. Sorry. I know you don't want to get your ratings messed up. Whatever. Nobody said anything. So where were we at? So in the Tamercan book, like in one of the images of a forge, you can actually see the makings of the same rune on the forge of this mountain realm rune.
Yes, it's actually on one of the Chaos Dwarf forges.
It's one of the like the anvil of the Chaos book. So it's not in any of the rune lists that's ever been published, but it's present on some of the other Chaos Dwarf iconography. And I thought that was really interesting because the Chaos Dwarf iconography, like Chaos Dwarf stuff, shows up in Fire Slayer stuff, like the rune master guy. His beard, like, has been very classically described as like Chaos Dwarfy.
Yep, sure, absolutely.
And then I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, man, yes, the hat thing's funny, and all the other imagery and the bowls, and then I was like, but like it doesn't have any of the other distinct elements. Yeah, yes, we have a big bowl monstrosity, but it's not like we have any Lamasu, right? Like, because this is the classic Lamasu, right?
Right, sure.
Well, when you look at Lamasu, they're celestial beings bearing human heads, bulls' bodies, sometimes with horns, ears of the bull, and wings.
Okay.
And then we have Teclis.
Sure.
And originally I was like, yeah, this is like a sphinx. And that's what we kind of talked about it, but it's not. Historically, sphinxes didn't have wings, and they certainly didn't have horns, ever.
Okay.
Lamasus, on the other hand, did.
Okay.
Arguably, this is a beardless Lamasu.
Sure.
And so then...
Which one might argue that the Mesopotamian Lamasu had the beard because that was in fashion at the time.
Right. That's like culturally appropriate. Elves don't have beards, folks.
Sure. So their Lamasu would be beardless. Okay.
Their Lamasu would be beardless. And so then I'm like, wait a minute. Like, we have way too many correspondences to be accidental.
Okay.
Like, when you get to that point, and I began thinking like looking into the lore of Hashut, which is the god of the Chaos Dwarves.
Yes.
Described as the father of darkness. And the more I dug into like what happened in the lore from like Tamercan, Hashut himself he came like the Chaos Dwarves came to worship him is a mystery. But it was during the age of like cataclysm, I think they called it. And what's described here for the Father of Darkness is that during what was called the time of chaos, Hashut came to them and delivered the dwarves from the rest of the chaos gods, and offered them succor and protection.
Okay.
And what we learned in the lore video on Saturday was that the elves basically, they like during the age of chaos, they messed up a bunch of stuff. Chaos invaded, and they went to make amends with.
They ruined their realm. They ruined Haish with their own magic. That's why
they ruined Haish with their own magic. But it was like in the midst of the age of chaos.
Yep.
And they sought to like make amends with the realm personified, and they began like submitting to the realm and submitting to those disciplines and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I think they made a mistake.
Okay.
I don't think that Hashut, or I don't think that what they communicated with, I don't think is the plane per se. I think it's Hashut.
Sure. So your argument here is when you look at the iconography, the runes in play, everything like this, what it's pointing to is this Chaos Dwarf iconography, this Hashut type iconography. And we know from what Phil Kelly said in the talk that they supplicate themselves to the realm itself, right? Yes. And that takes the form of the 4 elements.
Right.
And so your argument is either all or at the very, and he said that the mountains themselves are sentient. Right, that these big mountain spirits are sentient things, and they test the Lumineth often violently. Right.
Yep.
And if they pass, then they bestow upon them boons.
On these boons. And so, interestingly enough, here's another piece of this I hadn't mentioned. I'm still trying to track down in what lore book this was said, but some people contest that Hashut isn't a chaos god itself. Mm-hmm. But rather a spirit, like a demonic or greater demon or spirit of a volcano.
Well, what's interesting about that theory, so just I'll bolster your case here in some way, right?
Sure.
Is that in general, like, so I'll say 2 things pro and against, because obviously this is all for it. The elves have a history of doing psychotic, dangerous, deadly things to prove themselves.
Sure.
Right? Whether it be the Phoenix Guard or the Phoenix King himself, right, and walking through flame and burning themselves and coming out the other side with boons, or white lions literally wrestling the giant white lions of Trace, which was, super deadly and could kill them. And many white lions did not survive that test.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yep.
It's just as many Phoenix Guard did not. And so, like, it's not that the elves don't have a history of this sort of behavior. At the same time, one would expect that, order type, these kinds of boons, the gods that will generally give boons for that kind of activity.
Yep.
Right? For complete supplication and weathering extreme hardship and proving yourself.
Yep.
Is the chaos gods, right? that is their MO.
Right. And not only
prove yourself and you will get the boons of chaos.
And not only that, it specifically calls out in Hashut that Hashut, unlike most other chaos deities, didn't corrupt, like physically corrupt. Like it wasn't physical mutations.
Right.
Were the blessings of Hashut.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, like Hashut remarkably protected most of the chaos dwarves from such corruption. And such corruption only began to slowly creep in after millennia of influence, which is like the horns and like the teeth and stuff like that. Yep. And so what I would argue is like, and in the books, it says that they had forgotten what had actually transpired to bring about their servitude to Hashut. And so I'm arguing that like the old world chaos dwarves are millennia down this road that the elves have only started a millennia or 2 ago.
Sure. So that you have like Hashut or some minor chaos gods like this or something like that, some malevolent force that is using the same tricks here and is basically rebuilding the elves. And so now, here's what I'll say.
Right.
Obviously.
Well, can I put pointing out something else too?
Go ahead.
When you go into the lore of the Warcry warbands, you'll notice that they don't worship gods, they worship concepts.
Yeah, sure.
Like deceit, trickery, or all those things, and that it's behind those other things that are being worshipped
Do the actual chaos gods lie? Yes.
Right.
Only the upper level chaos people who've really like gone down the road a long way actually know and call the true chaos gods by name, right?
Right. And what I would argue is that I think that this is like one of those, that's maybe what's going on here, and that we would probably only find out years down the road.
Mm-hmm. So I'll say two things about this. One, I think this is, a lot of what the big C, what we call coincidence, right? And just repetitive design languages, right? Like, to apply Occam's razor, the simplest answer here is there's a limited number of assets they have. And by the way, the mountain rune is just like the Masonic symbol, right?
Yep.
And so, they just reuse that because that's an art asset they have. And it means this thing, the mountain, and the mountain figured into this, so they just kept reusing it, right? And the idea of this creature being what it is, Kalinor or whatever, the spirit of the mountain or whatever.
Yep, Solomon.
Or the Zenith, or I'm sorry, he's the spirit of the Zenith or whatever.
Yep.
It's just that. It's just them using some of the same signifiers and design language, right? Because again, they're human beings behind this, and human beings tend to echo their own past creations, right?
Now let me point out that like the Assyrian vibe of the Middle Eastern moving to East, of the dwarves may have just been brought in, and all of these are elements of that kind of vibe and feel, like the pants of Teclis, right? So it could be the kind of the cultural thing that they're trying to import.
Yeah, sure. Now, what I will say is this is a cool idea. I would love this to be true, right? This is one of those great reveals. Like, this could be a great story turn 3 years down the line, right? Where it turns out that what ends up happening X number of years into AOS 3 or whatever it is, right? This can be far in the future. They could pull this card and be like, and they could flip it like they did with Malekith and say, actually, it was like this the whole time, right? As the elves suddenly realize that they're or 5 years from now, or some great time when they want to publish a new version of this book, right? And the elves realize that they've actually been worshiping and empowering a minor chaos deity the whole time. And then this gives them like a card to pull on. So it could be that somewhere in like deep buried in Phil Kelly's notes
is a sticky note.
Is a sticky note, that just says like, maybe I do this someday.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the easy explanation here for this is not that they have like a master plan to go this way, because
no. This is the breadcrumb trail that's been left that maybe or maybe not, and it could just be a random set of breadcrumbs, or there could actually be a pattern and a path.
Well, sure, and my argument is the smart way to write lore like this is to do the J.K. Rowling thing, right? Where you just you throw out a bunch of random stuff,
and then you pick what you want at the end and go ta-da,
ta-da, and everybody's like, "Wow, you're such a genius! You had this all plotted out." It's like, no, I just threw out 50 threads and then went back and pulled on 6 of them. Right. And you forgot about the other 44 I didn't use, right?
Yeah.
And so if you put enough of this little stuff around, right, then it gives you room to play later. Because I doubt that, like, I'm sure that Phil Kelly has some kind of notebook full of like, here's some cool stuff we could do in the future. Right? Like, I'm willing to bet that exists either on a whiteboard or in one of his notebooks, right? Where he said, here's some cool stuff we could do with AOS and the Mortal Realms, where these things could go. And this probably, is on like a sticky note somewhere or on a page. Like, maybe elves are secret chaos worshippers accidentally.
And the interesting thing is that, like, we know Hashit is alive and active in the lore. The Fire Slayers article that came out in White Dwarf in the summer showed that he is actively corrupting part of the one main clan. What's their faces? So like he's being written about,
or whatever.
Yeah, but he's being written about his corruption of Vostarg in like actively currently, and by Phil Kelly and the other lore writers. And so he is being thought about. Hashit.
Yeah. Sure.
Now that said, the question is like, which direction does this go? Because like we know that they design models first and then they design the lore.
Yeah. Right.
And so, like, most likely, it's the visual language that got chosen, and it just happens to overlap, like, 100% with Chaos Dwarf.
Sure.
Like, aspects of Chaos Dwarf visual language. Who knows?
Yep.
For me, this is absolutely true.
Of course. And the point being is that this gave you a good hobby idea.
Right. This is the Hashit heresy.
Yes,
Okay,
and so your elves are going to be more classic looking high elves and be convinced that this is the truth. To
right,
them, this is the truth.
and they need to be rooted out and destroyed.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a cool idea for an army. I love the idea.
Yep. So sorry, bull worshippers.
You're all heretics, apparently.
You're all heretics and need to be eradicated.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fine. Cool.
There you go.
All right. So, good stuff. All right. Cool theory. That's the end of Ring a Ding Ding. Tom predicts a thing. So we're all excited.
Yeah.
Let's
So
now we
now
have
I-
to wait like 5 years. And as I said, if this ever became true, like my God, would this be this is you pointing. This isn't just you pointing to like left field. This is you pointing to like the red 87 Honda Civic in the parking lot outside, and then they just crack and break that thing's windshield, right? Like, I mean, that is a call upon calls.
We'll see.
Sure.
So, but yeah, so what that means is that I'm probably collecting this army and then basically doing a heavy convert of the entire army.
Sure. No, it's cool. Look, if it gives you a good idea,
Yeah.
For if it gives you
right?
Yeah.
Of like the narrative in the story. And so what I'm likely going to do now is do an entire Cities of Sigmar / Lumineth converted army with all shared themes, right? Much like I did my dwarves.
Mhm.
And it's a culture in a group that is preserved, like a group that's preserved their culture.
Yep.
With a bunch of like counts as city models, and then also the Lumineth.
Yeah. So yeah, cool. There you go. Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited.
No, Martin. Martin. Let me just clarify something. Tom is speaking narratively. He's not insulting anybody who likes these models.
No, you can like models. I'm totally cool with that. That's fine.
He's saying your army is in fact heretics. Like his general of his army is accusing your elves of being heretics and being tricked.
And it's the reason why my heretics or my Lumineth are going to kill all the heretics.
Sure.
Are going to fight other Lumineth.
Yeah, I get it.
They believe that those Lumineth are secret Haship worshippers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not disparaging any player.
Correct.
Okay, you can collect what you collect and like what you like. That's fine. But for me and those that don't appreciate the aesthetic, they now have a narrative that they can latch onto and build their armies around.
There you go.
You can also collect Lumineth, but now have a narrative world to inhabit for themselves.
Sure. All right. Cool. So let's do some pick of the week. Tom, what would you like to share with everybody, buddy?
Yeah, I am gonna pick a Kickstarter actually, and it's gonna be intimately related to what we're talking about today.
Sure.
Which is bases. Season of War, which is done by Jordan. Let me pull it up his stuff real quick. He is doing, and I think I've mentioned this maybe in a prior week, but I'm going to mention it again. So it's Jordan Duncan. Vince, you recently judged some of his stuff, right?
I did, yeah. So he took, when I did the Adepticon at home army judging over the weekend, he got second place, which I did not realize this was a thing until afterward. Like, I judged his army, I looked at all of them, he got second place, and then you were sharing this with me like 2 days later, and I was like, wait a minute, these bases in this army looks familiar. I was like, who's the people who did this? And I scanned down to like who actually did this, and I was like, oh, it's the same guy. He used his bases for it. That's cool. They look great.
And so these bases won second place.
It's a little more than that. His paint job won second place.
His paint job was stellar. But so they're base toppers. And so for those that haven't used base toppers before, they're not pre-molded bases, right? But they're going to go on top of your normal like black GW bases. They'll glue right on.
Yep.
And they're like pre-sculpted resin. And he sent me like a baggie of these and some of the other stuff that goes on top.
Like the columns and stuff.
Yeah. Like the columns. And they're beautiful. Like, I think the language I used on Twitter was like super sexy or something along those lines. I've already backed this Kickstarter because it's fantastic, and it's exactly what I'm going to use for my Lumineth bases. And I would, for anybody that's interested, it's super affordable. Bases end up being under $1 each, and which is really good for like sculpted stuff. And I can't recommend this stuff, the quality of these highly enough. So and these will do different or present different aesthetics than like rollers or other stuff that we're going to talk about today. So it's a Kickstarter. It's in Canadian, which makes it cheaper.
If you're in the U.S., sure.
If you're in the U.S., we have a very favorable exchange rate right now for the Canadian dollar. And so I want to encourage you to check them out. It's not like he doesn't have these done. He already has these done. That's the point. He's used them for his own army, and now that they're going to be widely available for sale. So we'll post it and we'll check it out. And you're going to likely see a lot of this because, like I said, when I do my Elven bases, I think I'm going to use these for all my elves. So
nice. Yep. For me, my pick of the week, I'm going to shout out our buddy Haywo Twitch, who's restarted his sort of beginner series. Okay, and he just put the first one up, which is Why Play Cities of Sigmar, and it was really good, as well as he put out the introduction video, which is fantastic, like the sort of introduction to Age of Sigmar. I'll link that down below. Haywo always does such an amazing job on his vids. They're always, funny and hilarious, and he's great at what he does.
Yes.
He has all of the wit and skill to make good quality videos that I lack in both regards. So do check it out. They're absolutely wonderful. So we'll link that, and we'll link the Kickstarter down below. Tommy, what are you working on, man? What's been on your desk?
Dwarves, actually. I have a ton of these guys that I am still pounding away at, and I am almost done. And so I'm moving into some of those later stages of like painting the glow effects and working on details. And once I get these guys done, I have about the 40 Hearthguard that I need to finish the basing and stuff like that. We're going to talk about basing today. Once I finish all of those things, then I just got some stuff in the mail. Got my final 5 Thunderers. So that's right, folks. I apparently didn't have enough because I just got 5 more.
Good.
And so I'll build those, and I don't know what I'm going to do is the answer. Once I finish this project, I'm still probably a couple weeks out from getting all that done. But once I get that done, I will either push through and try to complete all of my dwarf stuff that I have prepped. That's what I've been working on the last couple weeks. Or if I don't do that, I may just jump headfirst into. It depends probably on how quickly I can get these base toppers. I'll jump headfirst into the Lumineth army. For first with the Cities of Sigmar stuff, and then once the Lumineth models come out, hypothetically, whenever they do, I already went out and picked up right before our game stores are offering curbside service, so I went out this week. It's been so funny to order curbside models. I pulled up to our drive-through for our game store, and I knew that I've been watching 3 boxes of White Lions that have been on the shelf for 5 years at one of my local game stores. Mm-hmm. And they've just been untouched. And so I finally pulled the trigger and went out and ordered 3 of these boxes, the 3 boxes of White Lions that they had. So I had all the conversion bits I'm going to need for my Stone Wardens, which will be fun. So I'm kind of gearing up, winding down this army of dwarves, and then gearing up potentially my elves.
Yeah, so people ask, you don't like this army's aesthetic. Why are you going to get the army? And the answer isn't you don't like anything of the army. A lot of the core Lumineth look good. You just want to make minor modifications to a lot of them. A head swap or a weapon change or something like that. Things like the archers and the spearmen, I don't know that you have any challenge with at all. Maybe you'll still head swap some of them to some more classic helms in some cases.
Yeah, I'll head swap all of the archers. There's no question. I may even put Shadow Warrior heads on them. I'm not sure yet. Either it'll be Shadow Warrior or Sisters of Avalorn for those.
But updated elves for the most part, especially when it comes to the troops.
Right.
There's no issue there.
No, they're great. I'm not real excited about painting a bunch of Mohawks again.
Sure.
But I've painted hundreds at this point. So I know how to do it. And I know how to do it well. So we'll see is the answer. I don't know exactly what the conversions are going to look like. The other question is, we have no idea what model count looks like. This could be an elite army.
Sure.
Realistically, it probably will. You'll probably feel the loss of every elf. Like if I were to guess, this is probably going to be a low model count elite army.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, then like that changes the math, because on conversions you can do more elaborate conversions on each model. So we'll see.
Yeah, sure. So that's the answer there. It's not like, there was just certain elements of it that didn't appeal to you. Yes, I get it. Okay, cool. Right on. So my hobby time. Oh, I've been a busy bee this week. So I'm prepping up all of the Seraphon for the great paint them within 24 hours this weekend. So that's a lot of prep, because I get everything zenithal, and then I do a quick Agrax wash and then a quick dry brush just to get them all ready to go. So like I've got my big Carnosaur here. I had to get him. He's all ready to go. Obviously the little chair and stuff is separate. I'm going to use the little skink priest that comes on top but because I'm not using him, because I'm using the Krokgar build or whatever. Got all my salamanders, so all in all I'm prepping up 50 Saurus, 40 skinks, 3 stegodons, 5 Saurus cav, 3 Sallies and their handlers, 2 priests, a Slan, 2 Saurus characters, the Saurus character on Carnosaur, and the Saurus Eternity Warden. And a Slan if I didn't say a Slan. So that's a lot of stuff. And I've got my paint scheme all ready to go, so I'm just getting them all prepped. At the same time, in between all of that, I've also finally settled on the paint scheme for my Sisters of Battle that I like. This isn't going to look good on here, but she's going for this sort of magenta evening sky, I guess, thing with like bright shock of magenta hair. There's no way it's going to zoom on her, but that's okay.
No.
And so just working on that, and I actually really love how that's turning out. I don't know how I would find the wherewithal to do a whole army of this. But we'll see. Who knows? So that's fun.
I'm excited to see how it comes out.
Yeah, she's coming along. So I'm hoping that I'll have time to finish her before I need to start this army project. If not, I'll finish her up afterward. Not a big deal. So, because, obviously, once I get into this, it's going to be just this all weekend. So, because I have to do the whole army in 24 hours of time counting down, I will, sleep somewhere in there and not take that time off the clock.
Right.
I'll pause the clock for that.
Yeah, it's actual time, 24 hours of actual invested time in the army.
Correct.
Not start the clock, stop the clock.
Correct.
Straight 24.
Yeah, it'll be 24 hours over Friday and Saturday basically. So, yep. And obviously I'll have to pause to do the reaction show. So, there's going to be at least one interruption in there somewhere. Yeah. But other than that, since I'm trapped in here, I thought, why not get a 14th army painted? You got to be reasonable, right? So there you go. Okay, cool. So Tom, let's talk about basing, because this is obviously. Oh, by the way, all the bases are already done. Nobody can see them, but they're behind me.
Can you pull up an image from your Twitter of the bases, or do you want me to?
No, I'll show the image.
The reason, but this is part of what made me think about it, was you did basically you put this huge video up on basing.
Mm-hmm.
Or not a video, but image of bases, right?
Yep.
And I was like, well, those are elaborate.
Sure, I'll bring up a single image here of them.
Okay. And so I realized that my basing approach has differed dramatically over the ages. And so I figure we could talk through what that looks like, and obviously with the Kickstarter landing and the base toppers, it's an option that a lot of people don't know about it, and so I wanted to mention it and just talk about the value of it over against some of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. So here's a sample. This is a better sample, Tom, than kind of the picture of all of them, because it's a little more zoomed in. So this is 3 different bases: a Stegodon base, a cavalry base, and a 32 mil base.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just and these are all ready to go. All those bases for everything I mentioned, I sat there this week and cranked them out. Right, last weekend, sorry. I cranked them out all day Saturday, so I got all them done in one day. So that was like 150 bases, let's call it. Sounds
Yep.
about right.
You know, all of them look like this, by the way.
Yeah.
Like all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have a lot going on in these bases. Like you do beautiful, gorgeous bases. You have a philosophy of basing that involves like putting entire buildings on your base. Like that's very commonly Vince.
Sure.
But I do that too. Like I have a gun hauler here who's just like raring to, using some of that miniature, 3D printed or resin cast, whatever it was, terrain for dwarf stuff. So like, there's a lot of different philosophies basically to how to go about this.
Well, let's talk about that, Tom. That's I think that's exactly where I want to start with basing. Let's start with the basics, okay?
Yeah.
The puns. All right. So let's talk about sort of the principles.
So why base? Let me ask that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's you started with my first principle. Yes. Why not just have a and to answer the question that was just asked, yes, I did in doing these jungle bases, I did record a full tutorial for it, both the creation and the painting. So that'll be coming out at the end of the month. So the why base? That's a great question, Tom. I'm glad you asked. The answer is because the mini isn't done without it. Like, that's really the simplest answer. But I can give you a better answer because people might find that non-compelling, right?
Sure.
That's not really a value statement.
Yeah.
The reason you don't just leave the miniature on black plastic or MDF or whatever you happen to have them on.
Yep.
Is because your miniature exists in some kind of place, some universe, right? And by completing the base, you actually set the world that miniature lives in. And the environment, the world that they occupy, is it high-tech, low-tech, high civ, low civ, war-torn, not war-torn, bloody and brutal or not? You can communicate so much with a base, right? People, like when you base a city's army on like cobblestones and well manicured things and have like elements of a city, you immediately get the idea that these people are representatives of civilization and that they defend a city and they live in that city. If you take that same army and you base them in like wilderness wasteland with skulls and ruins, you tell it like instantly that army tells a whole different story just by existing on that base.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So like it's your chance to actually define the universe of your minis, and say the world that they occupy and complete the narrative of your miniatures. That's I think the most important thing, and one of the common pushbacks to this is, but what happens when I take my minis and put them onto a game mat or table that doesn't match that? And my answer is a strong, who cares?
Yeah,
that's always going to be the case. There is no one that matches everything because there's 1,000 different tables out there, except for like a clear base, which is nothing, and I hate. And two, that's just nothing. That's just.
And it's a nightmare to. It's uninteresting because it's not telling a story.
Correct.
And it's a nightmare to like measure from and move around and
right. And two, 99% of your model's lifespan is spent sitting on a shelf, not on a gaming table playing a game.
It's true.
And so what they look like there and for you, and when you display them on your display board or whatever, is what's relevant. It's the thousands of hours they are not sitting on the table that's relevant, not the 2 hours they are.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
So, I mean, that's why. Do you have any other thoughts on like why you base?
I mean, no, I don't. I mean, I think that covers it for the most part.
May I offer one more?
Okay, go ahead.
It's fun. It's a fun chance to be creative in a weird, messy way.
Oh, no. I have one. I have a really good one.
Okay.
It's about color balancing.
Yeah, sure. That's a good one too. Yeah, absolutely.
As for me, and like I ran into a very unique problem with my dwarves about my oranges.
Mm-hmm.
I had these huge mohawks, right? And I had sometimes beards, occasionally, but not often.
Right.
And occasional little sporadic glowing bits. And so I had really top heavy orange, and then like no other heavy orange anywhere else on the model. And so what basing with on lava bases did is it pulled the orange down, and it immediately balanced out my mini. It's a really fascinating, because if you were just to look at my minis without their bases, they aesthetically are super top heavy. Your eyes immediately go to the mohawks. You don't actually ever see the model, but as soon as they go on their bases, your eye is able to travel around.
Yep. Yeah, I think making, and like I said, just to return to my statement there, it's fun. Like, it returns you back to craft projects you did as a kid, where you just build stuff, because almost anything works. Like, you're playing with mud and rocks and glue and just stuff you literally, like, you probably make, arts and crafts projects with your kids with, right? Like sticks and mud and rocks and glue and stuff.
I mean, I should be.
Sure. So
I
like,
make them build boards instead.
yeah. It's fine. Whatever. Okay, cool. So here are some other. I've got some principles I actually laid down. You ready? I'm gonna. These are my personal principles. I want your feedback, Tom, and our audience.
I don't know how much I'm gonna agree with these, but go ahead.
Absolutely. This is Vince's principles of basing. Okay. All right. Number 2. So 1 was it sets the universe of the mini. That's why it's important.
Yep.
Number 2, mud and 2 tufts isn't a biome. Okay.
How about mud, a pool, and 2 tufts?
You got to do a little more for me. Like, I need different rocks, grit, something, like, whatever. Maybe some patches of trampled grass. Something.
I feel like you're calling out my nerd army.
No, I'm calling out GW's basing, actually. Oh, which is just like their mud paste, and then they stick 2 tufts on it, and that's it.
Right.
Their bases are universally the most boring bases. Now, they do that, I suppose, for a reason.
Because they're easy to replicate.
They're easy to replicate, and they can just make it across the whole army and fast. And they don't want to spend time actually like doing arts and crafts projects that they don't sell stuff for.
Well, it feels like there really is a regional difference on approaches to this, because like to this and boards, like for us in the US, it feels like, like I'm contrasting with like the UK. It feels like the UK does not prioritize or value, and this is a gross overstatement. But like the way
keep in mind, you've got people like Steve Foote living in the UK who are going to listen to this and just.
Yeah, there are certainly exceptions to this. Mm-hmm. But even some of the higher quality like compositions will often have like naked cork, for example, and stuff like that. And so I think that like it just doesn't feel that like the standard is different in different areas. Let me say it that way.
That's the easiest way to say it without trying to offend anybody. Yes, that's a good way. Like my issue is with just literally the mud and 2 tufts. Sure. I would even have less of a problem with it if you did something with the tufts, like wash those tufts and put some dry brush on them, right? A dry brush of the mud a little better. Just sprinkled a little bit of different size grit, like literally went out into your yard, picked up a handful of dirt.
How about just painting?
And sprinkled it on. Yeah, actually painting it. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, which leads to it. That'll be a later one.
Is that asking too much?
No, I don't think so. That's another one of my principles.
Okay.
So there you go. Like, to me, I can't stand the mud and 2 tufts basing. Sure. I'm not about it.
Sure.
So there you go. Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. So Velatron said, can you discuss gluing models to finished bases with super glue, even with pins, versus gluing models first using plastic glue, then building the base around them? Yeah, sure. I'll talk about that. Okay. That's a great thing to talk about. Yep. Here we go. Number 3, principle of basing. Most of your best basing material is either free or very cheap, or you already have it.
Yeah.
Okay? So, let me give you some examples. Dirt in your yard. Sticks in your yard. Sand from a place where there is sand. Rocks from your driveway or the road. Okay? Mm-hmm. Coffee filters that you have and you make into little leaves and torn up pieces. Like you just literally take coffee filters, you drop a little ink on them, and you tear them up into little leaves or things like that. Or you can use punches, or you can tear them into strips of like long leaves, all sorts of things like that, right? Put a drop of green ink or brown ink on it, boom. Yep. Like you have old coffee filters. probably. Actually, you could use the used ones even, right? Because then they're already pre-stained.
Tea grounds.
What's that? Tea. Yeah.
Like tea leaves.
Yep.
Especially used tea leaves. That's
Loose
a good
tea.
one. I think a lot of people use kitty litter, like non-used kitty litter.
Now that one you definitely want to be pre-used. Yes.
Yeah, like pre-used. But like I've seen that on bases before,
Sure.
and the first time I saw it, I'm like, really? And then like I painted it, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, as long as it's painted. Yeah, absolutely. Kitty litter. That's a great one. Here's another one, which is actually my principle number 6, which is old bits are good. Right?
Yeah.
Like everybody has bits, extra stuff.
Yeah.
Just lying around. So like when you have extra swords and arms and heads and feathers and hats and whatever, just like junk, just junk. Right? Just junk. Just put it on your base. Like all that's just potential future basing junk. Right? That you just like snap off a sword blade or cut off a spear or cut off a shield or a broken piece of metal or you know what I mean? Just like anything extra.
Yep.
That kind of stuff, right? So all of that is just like, again, you already have that. You already paid for it. It's now free to you at this point, right? Because you weren't doing anything else with it necessarily.
Right.
Radio Free Hammer Hall, shout out to Paul who said potpourri. Yeah, as long as it's ground up and small, yes. Although some of the bigger weird pieces can make interesting like logs.
Yep.
And stuff like that, like rocks, they downscale into that kind of stuff. If you have indoor plants, pine bark, right? If you have your indoor plants with pine bark,
amazing. I discovered that Steve Herner uses it for all of his rocks.
Yeah.
And like I used it actually here. I have a board here, and I use pine bark to face all of my foam.
And then just put some DAP over it.
And then just put some DAP and just spread it out. And you can sand it if you want. And I'm actually going to use some of the, I'll use some texturing, like Vohiyo texturing stuff as well to give it like a rocky texture. And so it creates the uneven, you get the rocky texture, like depending on what I'm going to do it because this is all igneous rock. But like this would work really well for like standard, like rock slab granite stuff. And so just whatever you're kind of doing, like pine bark is a wonderful tool for that.
Absolutely. Which leads us to the next two things right there off of what you just said, right? Which is one, cork, right? Old wine corks, or if you just go get big things of cork super cheap, like from the hardware store, you can literally get like, and go to the hardware store to get it, not like an art store. Go to Ikea or something where you can buy big packs of the stuff. You can buy giant flat packs of cork just for a couple dollars and you'll get huge amounts of it, right? Because it's meant to be like an industrial product. Anything you can buy from the home improvement store, which is where most of your basing stuff can come from, you can get on the super cheap, right? Because it's meant for like industrial levels of it. Right? Not for the literal eighth of a teaspoon you need at a time. Right. And then as was mentioned in the comments, this is another great shout out. Sprues. Your old sprues.
Sprues are a great source.
They can be steel beams. You can cut them into bricks. They can be just extra detritus that are on there. You can use them to just build. You can literally just cut them up and use them to build up space, right? If you're trying to get something up at an angle, you can stick cut a spray piece of sprue under there, stick that down. Now you've got the thing at an angle or raised up. You've got some mass. Put some kind of paste over that. Boom, it's hidden. You're good to go, right? It's just a support beam. Absolutely. Like,
I agree.
It like so much of this stuff is so cheap, right?
Right.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned roots. Yes, I mentioned like go outside in the yard, dirt, roots. Old roots are great. Lots of different roots. Yes, can be used for great like trees. Like root structures will scale into trees. You got to take them out. You got to wipe them off. Don't let dirt hang on there and stuff. And then you got to dry them out a little. But it's not that hard. That's just like sticking it in the oven for a little while on low heat. Done. Or even microwaving it, depending. So there's just like so much that's good here. You don't have to spend money to have fun with this.
Right.
There's another good one. Thank you. Many people are putting good stuff in the chat. Popsicle sticks for wood planks. Cut them up.
Yep.
Easy. Carve little lines in them.
So wire. You can get like, wire for cheap, like in lots of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I would do is I cut, like when I was doing my spiders, I did a bunch of these really thin wires, and then I like attached one into a drill and just held the other end with pliers and turned on the drill, and it wound
Right.
it all wet for me and looked like braided cord or spider web or whatever.
Yep. You can just take basic old wire.
Yep.
Here's another fun one I use all the time. So if
Yep.
you ever, Tom, do you ever buy paintbrushes? Have you ever bought a paintbrush?
I have, in fact.
So when you buy a paintbrush, you get these little like plastic tips that
Yep.
come on the end of the brush, right?
Yep. Yep.
These are like perfectly scaled pipes
Sure.
for your base, right? These are Insta pipes. You can cut them because you can generally get like 3 pipe sections out of any one, stick them onto like walls, stuff like that. You can drop goo out of it, all that kind of stuff. Easy, easy, right?
That's good. So these are things you can add to the base. So let's talk about the base itself. Or you're still going through principles?
No, still, well, I mean, I can pause my principles. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Because like what we're like a lot of what we're talking about right now are things you add to your base.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But like oftentimes you want to create some type of foundation for that base, right?
Yep.
Do we want to talk about what some of those foundations look like?
Yeah, sure. Let me answer real quick here. Ander said, what do you use to cut and shape your bark and cork? Just a knife. Yeah, just regular hobby knife or pliers or just tear it apart and break it up. Sometimes I use bigger pliers and just kind of break it into pieces. But yeah, that's all. Okay. So you're saying you want to build it up. You want a big thing on there, right?
Oh, yes, or like we've talked about the accessibility, but like we don't stop there.
Yeah, sure.
But oftentimes like there are things that you can like, how do I want to say this? Like, yes, sand and dirt, but there are like, we're talking about core materials. And so whether you're using like paste or cork or pre-sculpted or, like oftentimes you have a core and then the things that you add on top to accent.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And so you were talking about a bunch of these free things, but a lot of that is just stuff you add on top, not the core of what the base is. Does that make sense?
Sure. So what's the core of the base to you?
So oftentimes for me, I use a lot of paste.
Okay, sure. Like DAP. Is that what you mean?
Well, it can be DAP or like you would put me onto the Vallejo texture.
Yeah, the basing putties. Yes, they're great.
Like
Pastes,
these are like miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
They're like $8 or $10 or something like that. And you get like a huge 200 milliliter jar. So like it's like I don't know how many times what you get in a GW pot, but a lot.
A lot.
Like 10 times or something, some ridiculous amount for like, the cost of 2 bottles. I use these for boards. I use these for bases. They come in a ton of different textures. This is a very common thing that I use on almost everything.
Yep. They have different kinds of like pumice and stone and sand, and they all have different sizes of grit and rock and stuff like that. And they're just pre-mixed paste that makes it so easy. Yes, I use that stuff all the time.
Yes. Like it's a great core if you're wanting to like freehand create bases, right? Like, so if you're wanting to just like imagine a base, this is a great place to start.
Well, what I'll say is when, I talk about building up verticality a lot.
Yep.
And so oftentimes you just use cork to create the verticality. The problem I see is people stop at the cork.
Right. And they just like prime the cork, dry brush, and they're done.
Yeah. Don't stop at cork. Cork is a super useful thing that you can absolutely integrate into your basing and should. It's great. It's one of the best basing tools around, right? Like it's amazing. It's cheap and plentiful and you can have little bits of it sticking out and that's okay, but it should be covered. Right? Yeah. Like, it doesn't need to be covered 100%. You can have little edges of it showing here and there.
The texture shouldn't be cork. You shouldn't look at it and go, oh, that's cork.
Right. Absolutely. You should like put that, like the Vallejo paste you just have, or like, as somebody just mentioned in the comments, AK Interactive also has a similar line of basing stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So like,
and this can be, go ahead.
So for example, here I have like some AK Interactive puddles. This is just like a pre-mixed muddy puddle, like resin that you can just pour out and get a little muddy puddle on your base. Job's a good, and it'll dry in a couple hours. Done.
Yep. So these are like for freehand creation of like effects on your base. They're really good for natural surfaces. So rock, dirt, stuff like that. I found that I prefer, because I'm like pretty OCD on consistency, that I prefer some type of artificial thing being out of the base for artificial structures.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is like if I'm doing tile, or if I'm doing temple, whatever, or if I'm doing you know, like rocks that have been inscribed and things like that, I will almost always default to something I've like in a product that you can purchase.
Sure.
For example, when
let's talk about that. Let's move into. So we talked about a lot of free stuff. So much of what you can do, especially in natural organic bases, is free, right?
Yeah.
Now, I will say, even with structures, you can often get away pretty darn near free. Okay, if you're just talking about like ruins or broken buildings, you can build broken down rocks and stuff like that just out of some cork or, you know, just a little bit of plastic. Like, if you got old gift cards, you know what an old gift card is? That's plastic card. You can build little walls and stuff like that out of it. Boom, jobs are good and you're done, right?
Yep.
Okay, but you want to buy some stuff, sure? Okay, so you mentioned like this, so go for it.
So one example of this would be rollers, right?
Yes, sure. Our green stuff world rollers. Yes, absolutely. There are others out there. You can even make your own, but yes.
Yeah, but so green stuff rollers, for example, are like we use the Greek ones for our Daughters of Cain army, both of our Daughters of Cain, and so it actually created consistency across both Vince and I's bases. His were much better painted, but regardless, they looked similar, right? And these are great for like really small runes and like carvings and sculptings and stuff like that. And they also work for like not only bases, but like boards and all that stuff. Like let's say you want to have chunks of rubble that have like runes inscribed onto them. Or like you want to do Egyptian stuff for like a Tomb King's, you know, style thing. Like I have an Egyptian style roller to do all the cartouches and stuff like that.
Yep.
And you can actually like cut those out, by the way. And like you can, just like with all sculpting, like you can create these green stuff symbols or whatever, and then apply them to models. Like you wouldn't have to like make it into basic. But that's one way is the rollers. One of the challenges that I found with the rollers is that they create very flat bases.
Oh yeah, sure. So hold on, let's talk about this for a second. What do you use to actually roll your rollers in? Like, what are you rolling them into?
What do you mean?
Like what material? Because what is the base epoxy you are rolling on?
Yeah, like traditionally I had done green stuff, but green stuff's really expensive. And so I used the white version of what was that stuff?
Milliput. Yes, I agree. Yeah. This is my basing, epoxy of choice for rolling stuff into Milliput white. It's different than the traditional Milliput. It's used more for like it's super fine white. It takes the detail a lot better.
It's for porcelain repair.
Correct.
And so it is a very fine putty.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep. Exactly. And it's really, really strong. And like this, the white especially, yes, because of what it's meant for. I've had great success in using that. Now, my only word of warning with the Milliput white for everybody, just as a quick note, is that you know how green stuff is like yellow and blue and normal Milliput is yellow and gray. So it's really easy to tell how well it's mixed together. The two sides of Milliput white are just white. And if you don't equally mix them, they will never dry. So make sure you really knead that well.
Yes, indeed. Yes. And so, you know, rollers are good for what they do. But again, it can be problematic. Like if you're rolling like an entire like cobblestone pattern, it's going to be a flat pattern. And if you don't roll it correctly, like it may get uneven. And so it's going to look kind of weird. And so like you really need flat surfaces in order for those to perform the best. If you want uneven like cobblestones or stuff like that, GW shattered domain bases are good, but those are like entire bases and they're fairly expensive.
Yeah, let's save prefab bases because that's a whole thing we can talk about at the end.
Yeah, like prefab bases are quite expensive. They can create that uneven, like the tier. Like I remember one set that I looked at that had like a sidewalk in a cobblestone road next to each other. So they actually had like multi-level, and so those are really neat. They look great, but they're often quite expensive. You're normally paying between like $1.50 to like $3 per base. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Sound right?
Sure.
They can be very expensive. This is why I was so taken by the by that Kickstarter. Is that for Seasons of War is because like they let me have the best of all possible worlds. At like I got the uneven base tier. Like I don't know if you can see these. You can't see them at all because I did like the other one, the smaller one. But like the basing is not flat. Like it is very uneven. Like and so like if you set a model on there, like one foot's going to be higher than the other.
Sure.
It creates a very nice uneven. But I also get the ability to like add magnets to the bottom very easily.
Yeah, and I will say you can combine this stuff. Like you can do so one of the things I've done in the past is like let's take a standard base and I bisect it with a piece of cork or not exactly down the middle, but you know, some point, right? And then I cut the cork clean around the edge so it's smooth, right? And then I lay the green stuff or the milliput or whatever on the top part, roll that. And then on the bottom part, you do mud. And now you've got the edge of a street. Right. You've got like an old timey street where the sidewalk is brick and and you're on the edge of the road. Just that simple. And you have height variation, right?
Right. And so there's some ways that you can creatively do that. Whenever I have like the shattered Dominion bases for my Stormcast, or like what I'm gonna do with the elves, like anytime I have cracks in my base, I'll often drop some glue in there and sprinkle in like I have some different like tiers of grit and some of the finest stuff so that like, you feel the dirt. So it's a combination of both the pre-sculpted things and then also the natural material. So I would highly encourage doing combinations of some of this material to really like make a lot of the stuff pop.
Well, yeah, I agree. That's like another one of the principles is combinations of elements always feel better, right? The more stuff you kind of tend to put together in little tiny elements, when you have rocks, big rocks and little rocks and tiny grit, right? When you have flagstones, having a few broken flagstones and then tiny rocks and mud and maybe a plant or two poking out of the middle, right? Like some like a plant coming up through it. That kind of little stuff, none of that takes a huge amount of time.
No.
It's just each of those little elements makes it feel like it's actually sitting in a biome, like in a real world, in a place that exists.
It adds just that extra touch.
Right. Yep. So here's one that's going to be strange for me to say, okay? Which is and so Velatron kind of asked this question. Views on A hold on. Oops. All right, let me go back to exactly what he said. It scrolled off. More elaborate bases for heroes versus troops, and B, clean black rims versus colored rims. Sure. So, no, I haven't tried Super Sculpey Pro, but I have used DOS before, like the air dry clay.
Always black rims.
Always black rims is the answer. The rim of your base can be any color except any color you want as long as it's black. That's the answer. I will accept very dark gray and or very dark brown black. Any of those are also acceptable. It's not green. It's not yellow. It's not red. It's not anything else insane. Stop that. It's black.
Ironically, I say that I actually have models in my case that don't have black rims.
Yeah, I mean, this is the wrong answer, but okay. At any rate, yeah, so let's talk about building up, taller stuff.
Yeah.
So here's my basic principle. And I see people accuse me oftentimes of doing huge bases.
Yep.
Which I do, undoubtedly. I like tall bases.
You do. Yes, your Archeon base, for example.
But there's a rule there, okay? There is a principle I follow that I see violated a lot.
Yeah, you accused me of it recently.
Okay. The thing the mini is standing on cannot be bigger than the mini.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, that's not true, by the way, if you're talking about like a display plinth.
Okay.
Right, for a competition where you tend to be on like a square plinth and might have something built up and stuff like that around. That could be completely different. That's not what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
So, for example, imagine I have this like Sister of Battle right here, right? So she's like roughly 32 millimeters tall or something like that, let's say, right? Because she has a spiky mohawk and her stick and whatever. She's probably up to like 32 millimeters. I shouldn't stand her on something 2 inches tall.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
If you're gonna put people on very tall things, they need to be very tall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the only time that you can get away with, I think, breaking that rule is if you have a big, flat flying thing, and the flying thing is completely airborne and using the tall thing as just, like, to hold it up. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Exactly. Something like that. Yes.
So notice that this model is basically not as big as the terrain underneath it.
Right. So I have pictures ready for this to actually, like, show my
Right.
examples. So here we go. So this is my flying steam tank out of my Whirlwind's Edge army. I'll bring it
Yep.
up here so everybody can see it. Okay. It's on a big piece of building. And the building is slightly taller than it. Okay. But
Right.
it's also one kind of overlapping. Right. So it's
Right.
not just directly on top. That's another problem. Like, people have a big piece of rock and then set the mini directly on top. So there's no overlap. Right. Notice
Yep.
how the tank and the building overlap each other. Right. And secondly, it's for this floating thing. So it's meant to look like it's actually airborne.
Right. Right.
Otherwise, you want the mini itself to be taller than the actual thing it is.
Right.
An example of this, you can still get people real high up, but
Right.
here's my Vermin Lord I did.
Yep.
He's up on, and this obviously goes two ways because it has both the quite tall and the lower thing where I had the actual Skaven emerging from the sewers, where I went down into the base with the imaginary hole.
Right.
But here again, like, he himself, one, it overlaps, the height of the base overlaps with him.
Mhm.
And two, he himself is still taller than that base. Like, if you popped him off there and stood him down next to that, he's taller than that whole thing. Right?
Yep.
Um,
But his posture is interacting with the base itself.
right. If you want to just talk about, like, bringing somebody up, here's my Keeper of Secrets who's up on stairs. Right? So she's much taller than the stairs. It still does what it needs to do. It gets her up. She's much taller than a normal Keeper. But she still feels quite elevated, right? But she herself is 7 inches tall. This just adds another 2 inches to it, right? Even my Archaon, who's up on a building,
Yeah.
he's taller than that building, right? Like, if you take him off and stand him next to it, he's like this compared to the building. This is him. This is the building.
He's outlandish. Like, he's truly, truly outlandish.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the goal. He almost survived 7 days in the car with me earlier in the year. Almost. Like, he almost didn't break off of that thing. 7 days in the car. On the 7th day, the double pins that had him held in there.
Yeah, the vibration was just too much.
Right. It was the Chicago roads got him.
Yep. In general, you don't want to, when you're doing this in positioning, you don't want to cover your base with the terrain at all. This is something that, like, Vince scolded me about on a recent my Indra Master.
Yeah.
Because I have his feet interacting with this, like, the grade. From some angles, he's partially covered by the terrain itself.
Which is fine if it's the back. Where you went wrong is he needs to be flipped facing the other direction.
Right. Vince wants me, like, him angling down, but the way his feet were, he'd be, like, looking straight at the ground if you did that. In order for the feet to actually be interacting with the rock correctly. So I still like him the way he is, but Vince scolded me because he's like, it's too much of the models covered, which is, like, not even to his knee, but sure. Anyways, so yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. So, like, again, it's fine because he's taller than that rock. That's not the issue, right? That's perfectly fine.
It's the issue is that part of this is covered.
Yeah, look at him. Turn him so he's front facing to the camera.
So if he's front facing,
exactly, like, a bunch of the model is obscured, right?
It's really not, but okay.
I'm sure.
Like, one leg is obscured.
That's
but
so
sure.
much. A thing to avoid. I wouldn't list that in my principles, but yes, in general, you want to try to avoid that. Blitzkrieg said, "Isn't Gotrek standing on a base bigger than him?" No, it's actually not. He's taller than his actual base.
Right. That mohawk will work.
Yeah. Well, he's also holding his arm up in the air, right? For base rims, how about games like War Machine where facing is a big deal and it's customary to mark the facing on the bases? Just make them as subtle as possible. Yeah, for things where you have facing, I don't think that's an issue. Of course, you can still mark your facing lines or there on whatever. If the game requires it, or like some people on their Blood Bowl minis will use little plaques for the names of the dudes. That's all fine. Of course, that's game apropos. I'm just saying, like, don't make your bases bright red. They shouldn't ever be a hue, okay? Like, a thing that's on the color wheel should not be the edge of your base, okay? Because it's naturally going to clash with whatever's up above it, and you're adding another color to the composition of your mini and naturally detracting from it. Like, that's the problem.
Right.
If you find black too stark and you want to use like an ultra dark gray or a brown or a dark brown, as long as it's not like some sandy light brown that's mostly yellow, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's all fine. Okay. Let's see.
About, more principles, or do you want to talk about base compositions?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, go for it. I'm reading through the rest of the comments. I'm just catching.
So you don't, like, in general, the more that is going on the base, the better. In general, you can get too busy, but in like often you want to have at least like 3 distinctives minimum. And so one example of something in general you do not want to do, I've been able to get away with it largely, but in general this is not something that I would promote, is like, so for example, for my lava bases, you'll see, I literally just painted like a bunch of different colors, lava colors, and then put the crackle on, and use a very stereotypical basing for GW. And it's worked largely for the models, and it's nice, you know, it's fine. Because it's interesting and there's texture and it looks that a lot of work went in when it really didn't. But it's fairly boring.
Right.
And so what needs to happen is that there needs to be some differentiation between, like, there needs to be some detritus, or there needs to be some raised areas, or there needs to be skulls, or find something that's appropriate in world and pull it off.
Yep. Exactly. Like, the idea is to have different elements on there, because the world outside is actually quite varied, even walking down a city street, right?
So you want different textures, and you want different things that draw and interact with the eye. So an alternative of this that I'm working on right now is, you probably can't see this really well, but I'm going to do that same like broken pattern, but I'm going to have that running in between like raised elevations of rocks, and then in amidst the rocks are detritus, like things that dropped off the model.
Yep.
So that's 2 examples from the same model line for me of, you know, different ways I kind of went.
Yep. I think that, and it's a great better way to use it. When you talk about like, you want blood or flowing lava or something like that, like having that not be the whole base, but be an element of the base is so much stronger as a composition. Right.
And again, you can use it strategically to balance, like to color balance your models.
Right. Yes, you can, if you, that's principle number 9. If you have, like, if there's colors that aren't quite balanced, you can add that color through, like, little flower tufts or stuff like that, or just painting it on in some way down on the base. Put on a little crystal. So, like, a lot of people like little glowing crystals. There's tons of stuff you can do for that. Right. So, for crystals, one of the things I like to do for my basing elements is I went and got a bunch of Hearst Arts molds, and I just use Magic Cast 305, and I'll just spend a day and do a bunch of casting of those, and you can have, like, they have a bunch of, like, what do I want to describe them as? Dressing and accoutrement sets.
They do.
So barrels and candelabras and crystals and mushrooms and stalagmites and other sorts of elements like that. And you just cast a bunch of those out, and then you've just got tons of them to add on your basing forever.
Put them in a box and, you know, pull them out as needed.
Yeah, I still have a giant plastic case over there in my, like, basing holder full of barrels and crates and, you know, old broken barrels and whiskey bottles and, you know, every other thing like that. So it's just good detritus you can toss around to imply civilization.
Yeah.
People made things. And so I think one of the constant challenges here is, this is why I hate 25 mil bases.
No, there's just no room.
Because there's just no room. Often the miniature will just take up too much. So understand that when we say all this stuff, like, it has to be fit to the scale of the base versus the mini. On a 25 mil base, there's only so much you can do. So my best advice is, like, keep it simple with a tiny plant or a couple different types of grit so it's broken up in some way. But
Yeah.
there's just not much you can do.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay.
Right.
Just try to sprinkle in a little bit of different texture, or like, and so if you can't go for many elements and there's not space for elements, textures is also important. And so like the way that I've accomplished that in my lava bases is I use different types of pumice.
Right, sure. Yeah, fine. Absolutely. Mixing different types of stuff to that. Sprinkle some sand or rocks over some part of that. Grind up your extra cork, because when you're using cork for your bases, you always get little tiny extra pieces, right, that you peel off. Just save all those in a little Ziploc baggie, and then take those and just crush them in your hand like this and sprinkle them. Boom, big rocks.
Especially if you have the paste. Like you have paste, you sprinkle that in, and it'll just set into the paste itself. And then you prime over top of it, and it's fantastic.
Yep, easy peasy. Scatterbreak asks, what do you think of the Steel Legion drab that GW uses for their base rims? I hate it, and it's wrong. That's my answer. Most of everything GW does with their basing is incorrect. If I was king of the world over there, there would be some house cleaning in the way with the bases are done. Like, tomorrow you would see a completely new aesthetic. Immediately. Yes, Hirst Arts, HIRST.
Yeah,
they
were doing crafting, like home crafting of terrain before it was cool.
Oh, absolutely. And they have so many amazing things.
Hundreds of molds. They're all silicon molds. You do a plaster pour, or you do like the dental stone pour.
Yep. Or you can use, like I do, Magic Cast, which is resin, which is a two-part epoxy resin.
Resin, and you just pour it in, scrape it off, let it set, done.
Yeah. As they will tell you, because the resin heats up, it will have the chance to, over time, wear the mold out.
Yeah.
The trick is that that's if you're actively making a lot of terrain, not using it how we would use it. Like, I do 1 cast, or I do like 5 casts out of each mold a year.
Right.
The resin doesn't actually hurt anything.
So many things out of it by so few casts.
Right.
Because like each mold will have like 20 or 30 elements.
Right. Exactly.
And so he does like a couple of those casts, and then he just has a bunch of basing material for forever. But if like you're building a dungeon, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're gonna, like a lot of those, like you would use a mold to build one room, like because you have to do like floors and ceilings and stuff like that. Oftentimes you have to do like lots of pours on the same mold multiple times a day, and that's where it will begin to really wear out.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Because the resin gets hot as the chemical reaction happens.
Yep. So,
the other element here, so here's a Vince's personal thing, and I already saw what you said, and somebody kind of asked about this earlier. I hate flying stands. I avoid them. Like, I don't think I've ever used a flying stand, not once.
Yeah, Vince hates them with a passion of 1,000 suns. It's funny because I literally, like, the one flying stand you used when you did up my one Frost Phoenix just broke.
Yeah, sure it did.
That's just
inevitable.
It's been a couple years, and it went, and that makes me sad. But I, like, in general, like, I've actually used quite a bit of flying stands, and I use the acrylic rods. So, for example, this is an acrylic rod.
Yeah, stronger than the flying stand. Yes,
way stronger than the flying stand, and as long as you can accommodate it in the model itself, I use it for the ships, which you can. It's like 100 times more steady, both for transportation, and you also don't have to glue it.
Yep.
So, like, for transporting, it actually works quite a bit easier as well.
So somebody, W. Soren asked, is there a 3D print base topper? Yes, there are some out there. There are some STL files, both for the individual elements as well as for entire base toppers. I know I've seen some STL files.
Like print bases.
Or just print, the whole base, yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, that works as well, too, if you have a 3D printer. I recognize that not a lot of people have 3D printers.
Right, exactly. I'm not going to tell you that part of this is about how to make the most of your bases with hopefully the most minimal investment. Going out and spending $300 to $500 is and then starting a new hobby.
Or
more, sure.
Yeah.
Depending. I was going, like, at the low end, yes.
And in general, for bases, like, for 3D printers, like, some people will view this as heresy. I try to stay with only big things. And so in general, when I've printed small things, I've been disappointed.
Sure.
And the detail on bases is just fine enough that I've been disappointed when I've printed small basing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so in general, I recommend For at least 3D printing. Like I'm okay with terrain. You can get away with it a lot better, but for actual bases themselves, I've not been a fan of that. Unless you have like a resin printer. And then you're in a different ballpark. I've not done any.
And you don't need like supports as much either on something like a base print.
It's different. It's just different.
Yep. All right. So speaking of flying models, I have some more samples. So here's my Mega Boss on Maw Crusher. He's up on the Arcane Ruins.
I hate that model.
The War Chicken.
I don't like how you've sculpted him, but that's just because I don't like how he sits on top. Not the head. The conversion doesn't matter. It's how he sits on the stuff. I'm not a fan of it. But yeah.
There he is. So there's the War Chicken. The Flaming Rooster.
Yep.
He's ready to go. He's up on the Arcane Ruins.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is my Saint Celestine, who's also flying, who's on a very tall chunk of building on like a 40 mil base. But she is even taller by far, right? Because her wings are so beyond massive. And then there's doves and stuff also flying. And again, none of that is like she's not on a flight stand. There's lots of different ways you can get, flying minis up on things, right?
Yep.
So, all right, War Chicken, go away. Yes, I love my War Chicken. One of my favorite. I haven't done the second Maw Crusher yet. He's just sitting on my shelf because I don't know what I would do with the second one.
Oh, I know what you do. Do you want to know?
Sure, man. Hit me. What do you got?
You pick up some of the bullheads from the new elf stuff.
Oh, I already have a giant bullhead. I was going to cut it off of from the Beast of Chaos Endless Spells.
Oh, okay.
No, that's the correct size.
Yeah, I was say because like if you're the Barnyard Busters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like do a
gotta
steer.
Have a bull. Yeah, I gotta have a steer. Yeah, I thought about that, but I didn't think of I couldn't figure out the whole image because I don't like the wings and what they are there. Anyway,
have you seen some of the conversions? There's somebody that's done like 20.
Oh versions. Yeah, all the different ways they have out the wings and stuff looks great. Yes. So I'm anti-flying stand.
Yeah. I am a hesitant user of flying stands. And what I mean by that is I like them on my Indran riggers.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to re-glue a number of them. So like even the way that these like the curved flying stands with like they cup on the top.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than having a ball that glues in and breaks, they actually have like a divot that the model sits in. And so it has like a higher contact ratio. Even those have broken on me and like I have to re-glue. So like that's not abnormal. But I'm a big fan of anytime you can do like the acrylic rods and run them in the models. I'm a huge fan.
Sure. Somebody asked what I do for crystals. So there is a Herstart molds. I think it's in the that has crystals in it. I think it's in the dungeon dressings one. I don't know the number, but if you look up like one of the cave dungeon sets, there are crystals in that one. You can also just go to like little craft stores that have things like this. These are like little gems. If you can see those in there that you get from like little stamping stores and stuff for that. And those are just like little clear diamonds. I'll just put those on there and paint them, and they're perfect little crystals. You can get big bags of those and stuff from craft stores.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. You can also, by the way, just cut them pretty easy out of green stuff or milliput or something. They're actually a very easy shape because they don't need to be perfect. You just make yourself a little green stuff snake or something, let it partially dry, and then you just cut it like a pencil. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if all the sides aren't exactly even, who cares? Crystals aren't actually as perfect as we like often sort of imagine them to be, and then you just shave the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, done. And it's kind of easy. So that's what I do for my crystals. Yeah, there you go. Let's get some other here's some other principles of basing for me. Number 7, the skull pack is good. That's a worthwhile investment. One of the best investments I've made.
Yeah, I made good use of mine and used basically an entire skull pack in the formulation for my cadaverous wall.
Sure.
By the way, here's actually a good example. Can you guys see that very well?
It's okay. I mean, none of these things ever show too well on camera.
Sure, but can you guys tell the different colors that are present in the model?
No, it all just looks gray right now. And putting more light on it actually just makes it worse.
Okay. What I'm trying to show here is I'm trying to show that like not in the skulls, but actually in the texturing,
Yeah, sure. You use multiple different pastes.
I use multiple different pastes. A lot of people look at it like they saw that on a different model that I hadn't primed yet, and they went, "Oh, look, the snow looks pretty on that." Yeah, that's not snow.
It's just white basing paste over brown
Yeah,
basing paste.
that's that's a rough gray pumice instead of or I'm sorry, not the rough gray. That is the fine pumice instead of the rough gray.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point being, what I'm trying to show is that I use different pastes on top of each other, and you can see some of that variation here. Maybe I'll try to get a picture of it so you all can see.
That's fine.
But the other thing I was going to say is that I used a lot of skulls in this model.
Yeah. So I like the skull pack. I should also state that other companies do make this kind of stuff. Like Green Stuff World has a skull thing, as well as other packs of different things that you can put on there. They've got actually a bunch of different selections, as well as like their UV light curing resin, which is a new thing that's out there. They also make like a spider serum, so you can do spider webs, which is pretty cool, although they're not very durable, just as a warning. My number 8 principle of basing is nothing unpainted goes on the base.
Right.
Everything that's on the base should be painted in some way, even tufts and grass and stuff like that. Now, that doesn't mean you've got to prime them from scratch and stuff like that. As I've said many times, if you're going to stick some tufts on, I got no problem with that. Tufts are great. They're super useful. You should use tufts if you want to. But the tufts should have paint in them. Take some wash, get a nice old crappy brush, shove that crappy brush down into the bottom of the tuft and around the tuft after the glue is dried. Get that dark color down in the base, dry brush the top a little bit, boom, now it looks like a painted element. Just that easy.
Yep. Yeah, always want to touch everything with the paintbrush.
Right. Because things that are acrylic painted will just show very different. There you go, Tom. Yep. That's nice.
Yep. Yeah, so what, like, in addition to the skulls, you can see the different variations in color in the white, and there's like some transparent and some dark gray. And then what you're actually seeing there is you're seeing the different types of paste that I use, so that there's multiple textures even amongst like the stone, the igneous stone that I'm doing there. So, and then obviously you can see all the skulls, lots of skulls. Skull packs are good.
Mm-hmm.
So
skull packs are good, yes, highly useful, absolutely.
And you can see how I use some of the bits here, by the way, where you can see excess not only skulls, but there are heads that for like helmets that were able to be integrated into the base itself. So yeah.
Yep. So that's yeah. I'm trying to think of do you want to talk about just like pre-printed, pre-made, prefab bases? Because that's another thing that's out there now.
Yeah, and that's what I talked about. Like we talked about that in the midst of when I was talking about toppers. Like sometimes you can buy like the prefab stuff, but it can be expensive.
Sure, like GW has obviously their line of the various pre-made bases, the Shatter Domain or the Sector Mechanica stuff or whatever it is for 40K. Secret Weapon minis, I don't know if you've seen, but they're launching their completely fully painted prefab bases, right?
Yep.
We would be remiss here if we didn't also mention, hold on, let me grab them. Here we go. Gamer's Grass makes a whole line of like completely prefabbed bases that are actually come painted and everything like that. What's interesting is you could continue working on these.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Like there's no reason you can't take this and add more on top.
And
paint some more on top of there.
I use paste in the Shattered Dominion bases in between. Right. For their really badly sculpted like ground and mud, like rocks. I worked paste into those areas where they're supposed to be ground.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's no reason you can't take those prefab bases and then continue to still add on top of them, right? Make it your own. In the same way with the rollers, you shouldn't just stop with the roller. You should add some dirt on top, some other things on top, throw a skull on there, whatever, right? Like do some of those extra elements. I think it's the same thing here. When you do the prefab base, whether it's painted or unpainted, you can then continue adding on top of it, right? So the door is already open behind me. That is the open door. Yes. The doorway itself is right there off camera. So that's fine. I'll get yelled at later, apparently. Even though she doesn't remember she gave those to me, but that's fine. They did come from my wife. It was a very generous donation. A lot of my basing supplies were my wife going, "Do you need this stuff?" And me going, "Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
I'll find a use for it."
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the photos that I had prepped up. I wanted to talk about. Oh, we should talk a little bit about water elements. So here, like you mentioned, this is my tree lord, where I have the water stream running through the middle that he's standing over, and lots of different flowers and rocks and stuff like that. Water elements are fun. You can use. There's lots of different water products out there. I mentioned the AK Interactive Puddles earlier. That's a simple one. You can do just like magic water or woodland scenics, makes a little water product. All of that's perfectly fine. If you're just using a tiny amount, if you just need a little bit of puddle,
Yeah.
good old fashioned gloss varnish mixed with like a drop of ink, little
True.
puddle, good to go.
I still use the trick that you showed me like years ago, which is all of the plastic pack stuff, like the flat plastic.
Yep. Your clam
whatever.
packs.
The clam packs.
Yep.
I would cut out sheets of that plastic, and then I would like cut out like puddle like surfaces.
Yep.
And then glue those down, like glue those raw to the black base, and then I paste around those puddles, and then you have like placid, like surfaces, non-textured surfaces, that once they get primed, they look like pools of water.
Yeah. And if you do ever want to make waves or something like that, snow effects make actually really excellent like little wave crests in water. Yeah. You can just use all your stuff for snow and make the white foam of crashing waves. So
nice.
Easy. So you don't have to get anything special for that. You just use the existing stuff. So nice. Yeah. The final thing I want to mention is floating bits. Floating bits are fun. So this is my Medusa for my Daughters of Cain. And or one of them, and there's a bunch of like floating rocks with the lightning that she's casting down into it to raise it all up. Yep. The lightning is literally just paper clips that I cut and glued together. That's all that is. And then the basing bits are just, you can take little rocks and you glue them to various elements, just touching little corners to each other, touch it to the lightning, touch it to a part of the miniature. If you spread it out and have just like little corners holding it all in place, it will feel suddenly like it's floating.
Yeah.
Right? Like it communicates that very effectively and efficiently. And it's so fun and cool to do like floating base elements. I imagine
an entire army that is utilizing lightning like this. Like you should redo a Stormcast army
where they're all like showing up and dropping the lightning. Like the casters are shooting it out, and like all of them have lightning coming down.
Yeah. Yeah, do like a short 1,000 point or 1,500 point force of Stormcast, which would not be many models.
No.
But just integrate
it would be 3 three star drakes. Boom. Done. Yeah, 3 star drakes, 3 battle line, I'm in.
Can you imagine like the lightning arcs between their like wings?
Oh, sure.
And stuff like that. Like that would be just it would read so easily.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty.
Absolutely, man. If we get a new Stormcast book at some point, and that like 3 star drake battalion actually becomes in any way good,
right?
I'm not going to be able to resist. I'll do a 3 star drake army. Like I've wanted that forever. I just wanted to do something cool. If I'm going to invest 1,500 points into 3 models that are going to lose games constantly, like I should at least get a cool effect out of it. That's all I'm saying. That doesn't feel like I'm asking for much.
No, and just imagine like doing those lightning effects, like it would just look amazing. Yeah, and like you could do them breathing lightning.
Yeah,
that's a breath weapon. Oh.
My claws, spears, my teeth, swords, my wings, a hurricane, my tail, a thunderbolt, and my breath, death. Yes, correct. No, absolutely. Yeah. All right, cool. Anything else you want to say about basing? That's pretty good. I mean, that's a lot of stuff.
No, we covered a lot.
I think in the end,
there's a lot of opportunity to tell some really neat stories.
Yeah, I think the right answer is don't miss the chance to make your models be, 1, much more visually compelling, 2, live in a world in the mortal realms, in a place, tell a story, tell a narrative just by existing on their bases, and 3, remember that you don't need to spend a lot of money. So much good basing stuff is free. or darn near free or super cheap at a hardware store, or if you can't get out to a hardware store right now, you can search around your house and just use old stuff. Like if you're trying to base sci-fi stuff and you've got old pieces of technology, like most of us do, right? Like
Yeah.
old mice or keyboards or cables, you can just cut that stuff up and it makes awesome like 40K sci-fi ruins, sci-fi
So
detritus.
so final thought for me would be basing is never going to win you a competition.
Like a painting award or whatever.
Right. But
Sure, but it will lose you.
but it will lose you awards.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when your basing just isn't up to par to your competitors. Right. Because what's going to happen is that it's not that they won on their basing, but if their basing just looks better than yours and everything else is being equal, they will win and you will lose.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. No, I agree.
And the other thing is that like bases can be, like Vince, you always talk about the 3-inch mark or the
10-1-1 rule.
The 10-1-1, that's what it is.
Yes. Oh,
Which,
that is a really good thing. Hold on. We do need to cover this.
okay.
This is a really important thing. Thank you, Philosopher X. Gluing before or after painting, like on the basing.
Yes.
My answer is I find the way that works for you.
Right.
So I do all of my stuff separate. I do the bases separate. Like I have those 150 bases sitting behind me, and then all the models are just down here, right? On just like temporary holder bases. Like
Right.
old squares and stuff is what I use for.
Right.
And then I glue them on. If they're in the case of these guys, a lot of these things are metal, so they're just getting glued down, and they're just gonna have to like deal with that, man. For most of my serious armies, I pin them because I have pins going into the feet, so they're all pinned into place.
Yep.
In either case, I always set them down with Loctite gel glue. Okay.
Okay.
Like the super gel, because this will hold stuff in place. If you can pin, do pin. For pins, I just use a bunch of old paper clips, drive them up into the feet, and you never need generally more than one pin. Drive it down in the base. They will be stuck there forever. They will not come free if they're pinned down in the base. If you can't do that, then a good dollop of the glue will do you.
Yeah.
If you don't like that idea or you don't want to mess with that afterward, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing the whole thing. I would put the basing material on, like I'd glue the fig down and then put the basing material around his feet, build all that stuff up, and then prime and paint the whole thing like that. I wouldn't try to do the basing paste and grit and sand and stuff after the model's painted. That's a recipe for disaster.
No, but in general, you won't be able to, like some effects you won't be able to get. And so you just need to be sensitive to that. Like it's really hard to do the color, like crackle paint.
Yeah.
Like you have to have layers of paint and stuff like that down in order to make that actually read right. So you just need to think you need to think through what your steps are.
So my preference is always do the base completely separate from the figure, paint them both to done, and then put them together.
Yeah.
But again, your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
So
it depends on what you're doing is my advice. Sometimes I pin, as you can see here, right? And sometimes I just put them down and then, I glued them down, based around, pasted around, and then primed everything and began painting.
Right.
Yeah. So let's close on the 10-1-1 rule.
Okay. 10-1-1 rule.
Because you do painting competitions, and this is where kind of the rubber meets the road, right? About how basing is going to influence your model.
Yep.
And tell us what the 10-1-1 rule is.
So the 10-1-1 rule as a paint judge is you should draw my interest from 10 feet away. Like I should look over at your army from 10 feet away and go, oh, that looks neat. I want to check that out, right?
Yeah.
The 1 foot rule, at 1 foot, you should have me excited, right? Like at 1 foot, I should go, oh, okay, there's a lot here I want to look at.
Right.
And at 1 inch, I should be able to look close to your army and be amazed by the details that I didn't see up until this point. Right. And a lot of that can happen in things like basing, right? Where I notice elements of your base. Not always. There's plenty of stuff you can do on the mini too.
Right.
But
so basing is an excellent place where you can do where the 1 inch will often sit. Like you can freehand and stuff like that, and that's important. Don't misunderstand me. But like hiding elements in your base can be a great like grabber at 1 inch that really rewards the observer for leaning in.
Yeah, like a little while ago, somebody asked about what about having hidden elements on the model, right? Like having a
Yep.
little sneaky grot hiding somewhere or something like that. Yeah, or a little animal. Yeah, I love stuff like that. That's fantastic. It doesn't need to be visible. It can be a discoverable element. That's
Yeah.
just fun.
Right.
Right.
So example of this, like I've showed this model a couple times, right? But what most people haven't seen is that if you zoom in, there's a set of dynamite underneath the arch that's been attached.
Nice.
And so there's a story going on here that's going to be like hidden throughout, that those that look can actually begin to discern what's going on.
Yeah. So you can add little fun story elements. Yeah, I agree. Yep. Cool. But have fun. Like it's a chance for fun. Be a kid again. Play with mud and glue and, make your army something that's cool and unique and yours. It's a chance to bring you into the model, just like your paint scheme is, right? The basing is the same way.
Right.
So yeah, there you go. All right, cool. Good stuff. That's basing. Hey everybody, if you liked this discussion, hit that like button. That's really helpful when you do that. So please hit like. We really appreciate it because it helps other people find this show, and that's totally awesome. And people need content right now because we're all just sitting in our houses. So let's hit that like button, and I really appreciate that. We'll be back, of course, on Saturday to do the reveal review show. So check that out. We'll go live shortly after the whenever they finish is when we'll go live. I don't know if they'll do another hour and a half or how they'll set it up. We'll see what this turns out at, but we'll go live shortly after that. But as always, I very much appreciate you watching. So thank you very much. And as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.